Frankly, it's very difficult to find the right line after such a powerful presentation and discussion that happened earlier. But nonetheless, harnessing the power of the potential that was discovered or that was led to be discovered, which was told here, is what we would be attempting in the next 30 to 35 minutes or 40 minutes. We have a couple of very distinguished people to help us identify this, how they are doing it in their organization, in their previous organizations. So the first person I would call on stage is Dr. Sonal Modi, a techno-behavioral expertise which helps in being a strategic partner to the business and building organization-wide talent capability to leverage the competitive advantage. She is currently working as the Vice President of Enterprise Technology Learning Insights team at Mastercard. Her session is about the broken talent journey, more about understanding the skill gap and how they are building ways to mitigate that. May I welcome Dr. Sonal Modi. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you so much for the opportunity given by RPS as well as NIIT. It's a privilege to be standing in front of this podium and talking to the fraternity. We have a great collective intelligence of 60 odd people sitting here in the room, and therefore reinforcing the same thing is what I'm trying to do over here. Sharing some of the best practices from Mastercard as an organization that I'm leading in the technology front. And of course, talking about certain experiences that I have gained over the last 25 years being in the technology frame of things, doing diversified kind of roles. Started my career as a software engineer and then went into program management, project management, a lot of stuff. And then eventually had passion to do more of facilitation kind of roles, consulting kind of roles, and then being thick and thin with the business. That has always been my forte, and that has kind of leaded this pathway of getting to the position that I am. Well, I have a long association with NIIT when I completed my graduation in somewhere around 1995, doing my electronics engineering. And then that was an era where people from electronics or other kind of streams would definitely get into something which is software, something related to technology learning, etc. And my first course that I did in the software technology area was actually from NIIT. So that's the long association that I have with NIIT. And with RPS, it is a great privilege to say this, that I have been working with RPS through various organizations that I have been working and great partnership that they hold. I'm definitely going to talk about talent, the biggest piece that is going to be the theme today that we have picked up. The pleasure that I have talking on in this particular forum is for obvious reason, is because we are not talking about pandemic. We are actually talking about talent, which is the real problem at hand. And as L&D leaders, we have so many meteor roles to solve today. Any chaotic situation that the business goes through, definitely it is the L&D which is picked up and say that, hey, can you actually do something around it? It is HR, but it is more of L&D. The partnership with the business comes actually from L&D when it comes to talent-related stuff that we are going to talk about. I was pleasantly surprised, and it was music to my ears when I heard Mr. Thadani saying that learning and development is a small function, but a very important function. How well do we like that statement? I'm sure that each one of us sitting in the space and doing the work in L&D area definitely would love to hear this. And that's how we have evolved as a function. Undoubtedly gone from pillar to post in multiple ways, but today we have a seat on the table. And how do we actually leverage that position? Pandemic really threw a golden opportunity for learning and development teams and being closer to the business and kind of being, working on their strategies in this kind of tough time has been our role. So I see that there was opportunity in this adversity. With that, I will kickstart of what I wanted to go through. When we talk about thriving in broken talent, and I agree to the fact that, do we really want to go back and think whether the talent is broken or there is a broken talent environment that is existing? Probably not. Probably the lens has to change, the frame has to change, the way we think about it has to change. The dynamics have changed because the technology advancement has gone from one phase to other, and it is so quickly changing that it is becoming, increasingly important for learning and development function to stay at pace at which the technology is changing. Because we work very closely with the talent, we work very closely with the business. And we are going to talk about skill gaps. We definitely are going to talk about talent taking the center stage. You talk about onboarding. Today, all our onboarding processes revolve around how talent or how the new person entering into our organization is going to feel about it, the experience piece of it. And therefore, our onboarding kind of processes have changed, right? When we talk about learning, we see what is the comfort that the talent is going to go through, because only then it will give a great experience to the learner. And that's why we are actually revolving around the talent again when it comes to the learning phase. When we talk about engagement, when we talk about environmental safety, when we talk about how the organization is kind of moving forward, again, talent comes at the center stage. So undoubtedly, talent definitely is taking the center stage, and it is really going to be very critical for us as an L&D function to ensure that we are very closely associated with the business, with the talent, and do different things today. Talent development lens definitely is moving from one place to other. Am I audible now? This one? Okay. So the lens for talent development definitely is changing, and we definitely need to look into that. How are we reimagining the entire talent development space separately, differently, uniquely, right? Common mistakes that we make. From my experiences, I would like to share what are the mistakes generally that we do and how can we actually overcome those in order to give better experience when we talk about talent development. And finally, we want to shift gears and reimagine the entire talent space. There's a lot of purpose over here, but what is important and what I want to drive your attention towards is, if you look at it, 87% of the organizations already have realized that there is a gap in talent. The skill gaps is huge. Now, whether the skill gap is huge, or are we late in identifying what skills are required, or like Amitabh said, is the business really relaying that information to us well in advance? Do we take that effort in order to understand what business processes are all about? How is the business evolving? What are the changing facts? And do we actually improvise our stuff accordingly? There are a lot of things that we have to visualize when we talk about skill gaps. It's not just a term which can be loosely thrown. If you read certain articles, they say that talent gap or skill gap is considered to be a corporate fiction. And sometimes I agree to that fact that if we really look at that particular element differently, we will be able to solve a lot of problems. And I will definitely kind of share my experience of how we have been doing in my past organization as well as currently at Mastercard. If you look at it, the broken talent journeys, there are enough challenges that we as L&D as a function or talent development as a function is going through, right? Many of them are already highlighted by the previous speakers, where we're talking about quiet quitting and then moonlighting and then disengagement that is going through, and then hopping over jobs for very minimal kind of increment. On the top of that, there are a lot of other things that are expected from learning and development. But do we look at that as an opportunity today? I certainly, as an L&D leader, would like to take a look in a different angle altogether and say that this is an opportunity for us, because we are not, it's a passerby, right? Where learning and development teams are considered to be very administrative in approach. Tell us what we are supposed to do, and then we will do it. Tell us what kind of programs and what kind of skills do you require, and we will do it. No, we are asking right questions today. We ask, why is that you feel that learning is going to actually solve your problem? 99% of the time, people feel that if it is anything related to talent, if it is anything related to learning, it is about training. And I would disagree to the fact that it is not only about training. It is about an overarching kind of an ecosystem that we create, where we are giving right opportunities in order for the skill gaps to be kind of minimized or bridge the skill gaps. That is what I personally feel. If you look at it, there is, pandemic coming and a lot of other kind of problems coming, and then different kind of millennials entering into the organization, that becoming a different kind of problem and challenges thrown upon the organization, overarching for the talent development teams. And when I talk about talent development teams, today, it's not only about talent management, but the angle is actually moving and rotating more towards how are we engaging this talent? How are we building the skills that are required for the organization? And how do we move forward, right? What is that approach that we want to take in order to mitigate the challenges that we are facing today? If you look at the customer experience, do we all agree that customer experience is directly proportionate to the employee experience that we give to them? Because happy employees, satisfied employees, learning employees will definitely perform far better. They will be far more productive, far more efficient, and they would definitely like to do much more beyond what has been asked. And that's why it is directly proportionate to the customer experience or the customer satisfaction that we give. Especially in the tech product organization like ours, where the entire technology landscape is changing just so fast. It's so agile. Business is agile. Technology advancement is agile. And therefore, the entire workforce strategy or the workforce management strategy that we have at our organization has to be agile. Are we coping up with that particular challenge is a question that we need to ask. Are we behind the rail or are we actually moving towards it is something which we really need to look into. If you look at linear approaches of career progression, who wants to wait for 3 years for a next level of promotion that an employee wants to go through? Your millennials are expecting, tell me that this is my performance at the year end. It is very hard. Today, the managers or the leaders primarily have to prepare before they go for the year end conversation because your talent is really super expert. And if you're not going to give him exceeds expectation, he is definitely going to question you why. And therefore, you have to be prepared with your developmental case and go before you talk to the talent. That's where we are standing today. And what are the things that we really need to look into is something which I would like to cover. When you talk about talent taking the center stage, do we all agree that the organizational growth totally depends upon what kind of talent landscape that we have? Do we agree that the customer satisfaction and experience totally comes from what kind of talent we have because their performance is going to relay our message about the capacity and the competency that we as an organization hold? The organizational profitability undoubtedly is going to come from a super talented task force that we build. The competitive edge that we will get as an organization will also come from the talent. The organizational performance and the resiliency to come back and move fast into the market, which is so competitive, the same market segment being addressed by so many folks, and we are actually a pie out of it. How do we actually stay at a competitive edge? All of this revolves around our talent. And that's the reason it is very important to address it today. How does a talent development lens look like today? And for many of us, it would be few of these elements, or it could be a combination of all of this, or maybe many more other things. Today, talent development, when we talk about, we look at building high performance workforce. We are looking at fostering employee engagement, right? We are looking that, they are totally engaged in whatever kind of upskilling we want to give, reskilling that we want to give, and all other kind of aspects revolving around the engagement, the total experience. Bridging the skill gaps. If you don't understand the skill gaps, if you don't understand your organizational business processes, you don't know where your business is actually heading forward. And if we as learning and development teams do not have the essence of what's happening in our industry, it's very difficult for us to actually claim that we are bridging the skill gaps. I totally believe in that. And that's why I will talk about how we are doing things differently. Succession planning is another piece. The current talent, how do we move them forward? When the existing talent at that top position basically are not moving ahead. And then it becomes a vicious circle. How are we going to break that vicious circle? Through our L&D efforts. And given the fact that we have that much of capacity, that much of competency, and that much of pie of work to do, how are we going to be strategizing all of these things and being thick and thin and joint at the hips with the business is very critical. And of course, driving customer satisfaction. So how do we pivot from closing the skill gaps? Multiple things that we do. The first thing that comes to the mind, let's reskill, right? Let's upskill. Let's cross-skill, skill diversification. All of this is just one piece of it. But are we looking at a different angle altogether? For example, building a very robust planning strategy or building a skill matrix. Today, it's kind of a dream come true for all of us if we can say, or we can actually go to one spot in any of our portal and say that this is how my talent landscape looks like. These are the number of engineers. How many of them are product engineers? What kind of skills do they have? How many of them are software engineers? What kind of skills do they have? How many of them are sales task force? And what kind of competencies and skills do they have? How many of us today have a very solid and robust skill matrix? If we have, great. But it always has been a very perennial problem for all of us because we do not have a very strong and robust skill matrix. It's very hard for understanding and making a point as to where does our as-is talent landscape reside? Where are we today? What are the skills required for the future? Or what are the priorities probably for 2023? We are living in the moment. So in 2023, what are the priorities that we have at the organization level? Where is our current talent landscape? And what is the skill that we want to bridge? If that is a very clear picture, and therefore I'm going to say that we have to leverage technology to a larger extent. We can't put this problem to be solved for a later stage because it is never going to solve our core problem. And therefore, skill metrics, which is a very basic thing, many years we have been talking about. How many of us really have a robust one? How many times does it get updated? How do we understand the pulse of the organization? I think it's a big thing that we will have to actually focus our efforts on. Inculcating the learning culture. Simply creating a learning culture. Doesn't it look very philosophic? Many business leaders say, oh, learning culture, how would you define that? And definition will not come from L&D teams alone. It is a top-down kind of an approach. Do we sit across the table and talk to the business? This is a needle moment that we actually want to do, and that's the culture that we want to build. And for building the culture, these are the 2-3 items that we want to begin with. Because it's a journey. Building a culture cannot happen in 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, or probably 1 year. It is a continuous journey which has to be, kind of working together with the business and developing that. So it's actually a top-down approach, but we have to promote that. We have to be a consultant to the business in order to create that kind of a learning culture. Reskill, cross-skill, and diversify. Today is a world of diversify, even in organizations like where we never used to look at, bringing the older talent, like people. If you look into fintech or banking kind of industries, there are stalwarts working for 30-35 years on the same product. Unfortunately, the business is so complacent and comfortable with those kind of skills that we have that we don't take any effort of looking at how that talent can be moved from one position to other today. So within the organization also, there is a huge chunk of such kind of a talent which exists, which is really great, but they're doing the same things again and again. How can we actually pick them up and do something differently while as they retire or as that tacit knowledge would go away from the organization? How do we bring all of these facts back to the organization and give them a different thing before they actually go out of the organization? Is a different lens that Mastercard is actually looking into. How do we get those kind of stalwarts and do something else, train the next generation folks and make our organization versatile and keep and retain that tacit knowledge? Identifying and, identify and overlook talent pools. This is talent pools. This is exactly what I was talking about. And then finally, revising the hiring strategy. We have spoken enough in the previous 2 sections about hiring strategy. Are we hiring for roles or are we hiring for skills? Mastercard is very clear about creating this narrative that we are going to hire for skills. It's not that there was a role and somebody is leaving that role and therefore we'll hire for a role. It takes a lot of, it's not a statement, it's not an English statement, but it is actually a mindset that somebody has to be trained on. The entire task force, the entire recruitment teams, the entire hiring managers have to change this kind of narrative and think that we are actually hiring for skills and not hiring for roles anymore. Simply put, we keep talking about thinking in the box, thinking out of the box. I am putting a proposal over here. Why don't we think without a box? Okay. And that's basically about extrapolating. If you look at it, do we really have deep understanding of our business processes? Or do we really understand the business very well? How is it navigating from point 1 to point 2? I'm especially focusing this on L&D folks because we apparently go with what we have. We feel that we are experts in our area, but are we leveraging that expertise by actually wearing our own oxygen mask and saying that, hey, I need to understand the domain very well in which I am. I need to understand my business very well, and then I can stand very tall in front of my business leader and say that I want to discuss this as a strategy, which will be a game-changing kind of a strategy. That's the mindset that we need to develop, and that cannot come without we getting very well accustomed with our strategies, our business objectives, our alignment with alignment of goals, of learning goals to the business goals, right? Knowing the talent landscape. I spoke enough about metrics, right? And the skill metrics is very, very important. How we build it, how we keep it updated, how does the workforce planning teams are engaged and trained in a different way to ensure that this is kept at par so that we can do our jobs really well, is something which is very critical for us. Just don't keep any box. Just think, that there is no box, and we are actually extrapolating our efforts to bring something which is very critical to the business. A hold on skills, future proofing. What is required? Today, when you do needs analysis in the organization, you go to all the program owners or the business owners, they will give you a list of items. How many times do we go back? We are doing this very, very vigilantly. We are doing this very religiously. Going back and opening that list and saying that this is a laundry list. Can you give us strategic priorities? What is that you want to achieve at the end of 2023? What is your strategic priority? Can you give us the top 2-3 strategic priorities and also define a metrics, the outcome versus the output kind of a concept? Output will be for all the programs that we offer. If you are offering 1500 programs, we will give you the output. Whether the course was relevant, whether the course was effective, whether the course was making any sense or not. But when I'm talking about outcome, do you feel that we can measure outcome for all the 1500 programs that we are actually providing to the business? Definitely not. How can we be very, very clear and very definitive about talking to the business that if these are your strategic priorities, these are the outcomes that we are going to measure only for these 3 areas. We have thrown back the list back to the business saying that this is laundry list. Give us priorities. From 1800 programs as a list that we got globally, okay, from different business units, it came to a list of 190 programs. Do you think it was an easy cakewalk kind of a business? Absolutely not. You have to be very determined as an L&D leader if you want to make that difference. Don't allow the business a chance to say that, you know what, you don't understand our business. You know what, I don't think you can do this. And I think if that is a passion that you carry, if that is the understanding and the strong outline that you have, this is a difference that you want to make. Probably you will come to that particular stage. So knowing your business priorities, being very vociferous about this is not, acceptable kind of a stuff. We want something which is strategic. We understand your strategy. We rolled out a tech strategy, which was phenomenal. Every 3 years, we release a tech strategy. And that tech strategy, it was unveiled and a lot of other things happened. But we as L&D went back to the business and said that, let's identify and do an assessment whether the ground level engineers understand our tech strategy. When we did that, we realized that there is a very specialized effort that we have to go back to the business, work very closely with those strategy makers, work very close with that technical kind of stalwarts, and say that simplify it so that our HR folks will understand it, the talent development teams will understand your tech strategy, the employees in the organization in different fronts will understand your tech strategy. That is the kind of level that we have to go and dig deeper. And you need to identify the problem for that. If you feel, tech strategy is released, and let's go and roll out WebEx programs, webinar programs, curated learning paths, and people will understand the strategy. I'm so sorry to say that we are not doing our jobs well, right? And that's where the depth of element comes into picture. Even if you are an L&D person, do you really think beyond the obvious? Think about the business. Think about strategically how you're going to partner with the business. You automatically get a seat on the table. And when you get a seat on the table, do you make sense out of it and create initiatives which will be aligning to those kind of business strategies? Is something which we need to look into. Skill versus role. I clearly told you we don't hire for role, we hire for skills, and that's a different narrative. That's how it is imbibed. The way our hiring managers and hiring teams are trained is basis this concept. Different kind of things that we are doing for them. Long-term versus portfolio-based. Today, people don't want 3 years, I'll wait, and then you'll become a senior engineer or a principal engineer. I want to know how can I go and excel and get an exceeds rating kind of a stuff. And for that, what do I need to do? And therefore, we have created something called as a very beautiful learning journey concept, where we are saying that in whatever role or job family you are, you will clearly see a seamless learning experience path, which will say that I'm a software engineer 1. These are all the kind of learnings that I have. I click on it, I get all the accesses in a very systematic order. I get cloud environments where I can actually practice everything. I can actually pick up a program on a platform that we have, which is Gloat. Most of you must be aware. We have named it as Unlocked. Take an opportunity over there, do some project or a POC over there on whatever I have learned, and then go back and look at IJPs in a form that I did this project, I have done this learning, I completed this certification, I have done this POC, I did a shadowing kind of a job on the project. I am eligible to apply for this IJP role. That's the kind of an ecosystem. Was it easy? Is it complete? Is it totally accomplished? Answer is no. But we are on that landmark. We have already embarked onto that particular journey where we are creating that entire ecosystem. Now, do you think that L&D has a role to play? Of course, we have a role to play. You have to identify where you want to play a role. That's the shift that we want to do when we are actually managing talent gaps or skill gaps. Employee lifecycle, a journey and an experience. How many of us look at an onboarding process as a 7-day, 30-day, 60-day, 90-day? All of us. But somewhere we, kind of drop the ball. And we don't realize that we have dropped the ball. So for the first initiation of that particular initiative, you will be thoroughly doing it. Next consecutive ones probably will keep dropping the balls. And that's where the problem occurs. Something which can be automated as a process, something which has to be autopiloted after first or second implementations, that's where our head has to go. And therefore, we need to know how to embrace technology, leverage technology appropriately without overwhelming. And the same goes with digital transformation. Today, the problem and the business is identified, and I completely agree with it. When we talk about digital transformation in the L&D space, we think that bringing great LMSs, experience platforms like Degreed and Likewise or Perceptix, or getting other kind of platforms like a Gloat, etc., means we are digitally transforming learning and development space. Absolutely not. We are just overwhelming our learners. We are only overwhelming our talent to say that there are 10,000 things, go and pick whatever you want. If that is the way we are going to operate, it's going to be very difficult. We are not adding any value to the table. Now that digital transformation has come into picture, how would you curate the journeys? How would you make learning journey maps? How would you actually communicate that? How would you supplement it in a blended learning form? All of this is something which we have to strategically think. We can't rest and we can't become complacent just by saying that digital transformation means 10,000 platforms you have brought, go and learn whatever you want. That's not the way we want to operate, right? And then in the moment, continuous learning. I want some help today. Has the L&D thought about, rather than this traditional approach of classrooms, smaller webinars, nuggets, micro learning, beyond that, what is that in the moment learning will call for? It will call for that I need some certain help here right now. If your credit card is lost or if something is lost, you need immediate help. You call that number and you said, block the card, right? And your problem is solved, at least temporary. That's exactly what our millennials are looking at. They are looking at something which is very clear, very fast, on the job. And therefore, many a times, deep learning or that multiple year strategy is not going to work. We have stopped creating learning charters for year. We created for quarter. Very soon, I think we will go on to a monthly kind of a format. That's how the entire focus of L&D is shifting. Okay? In the moment learning is, I need it now. Can you give it to me? And how do we actually create that? Are there live SMEs? Are there webinars? Or anything that comes as a very immediate help to them without they going and hunting all over the place because of your so-called digital transformation that you have already bought into the organization. These are some of the things that we really need to look into in order to make that shift, reimagine the talent. We have a very, very important and prominent place in the organization today. We are required. The business actually cannot breathe without you for multiple reasons, but you have to prove yourself. Your credibility has to be proved. You need to know all of this essence and think not without a box, but totally differently. And then embrace technology. I think I have covered all of that I wanted to speak about. Getting the talent pyramid right. That is another problem. Generally, when skill gaps come into picture, we generally blame it on pipelines. pipeline was not good, the business did not give us. Did we ever go and consult the business and say that, look at this team structure of yours? All, stalwart people or senior folks are sitting over here. No change is happening to the launchers or the new generation kind of people who are entering into the organization. Nothing is moving as a needle for this group of people. How many times are we giving that insight-based kind of analytics or dashboard to the business, consulting them and telling them, here is the approach that we want to propose. And that's the only thing that you have to do. You can only propose. But if there is merit in what you're proposing, after you do your complete homework, I think the business will not shy away from leveraging you as their partners and doing things together with you. That's all I had. But to that extent, I just wanted to say some of the things that we are really doing well, and there is a lot more that we have to do, is creating that environment for our learners where whatever is required, you learn that. Whatever is relevant, you learn that. Because organization like ours, which is into the fintech industry, there will be security, there will be a lot of other kind of technical stacks that you have to learn. At Mastercard, we have a narrative where we say that we hire experts. When you come to the organization, please try and understand and adopt to the Mastercard frameworks, Mastercard APIs, the way we do the things securely. Customer is very pivotal for us. What are our software engineering principles? What are our frameworks? We actually do a lot of deep dive things on that, and these experts actually get acclimatized to the Mastercard way of creating products, and that's where we thrive. Going back to our things of thriving in that kind of a broken talent. Yes, there are talent issues. They have to be looked after with a different lens. There are a lot of things that we can do differently. I, as an L&D professional, personally feel that we have evolved as a fraternity. We do a lot of things differently. I'm sure in the next 2 days, I'll get to learn a lot of stuff from the things that you guys do. But this is a golden period for us, and we can continue to be at the top space, provided we change our gears. One last thing which I wanted to say, we never look into our own organization structure. Typically, an instructional designer is expected to go and talk to the SMEs also, do everything, and then also launch that particular course and also then campaign the course. No. Have you looked at the new emerging kind of L&D org structure? You need an analyst. You basically need a design expert. You need a content curation kind of a person. You need a strategist. You need a business excellent kind, a person who has that kind of consulting kind of a background. If you look at it, roughly that comes to around 6 to 7 new roles that has to be a part of learning and development teams today. It cannot be one single learning head, typically a team which does content curation, which does operations, which does everything under the gamut of learning and development. That's not the way we will be able to thrive. We have to look into our own org structures differently, have to be thick and thin with the business, and continue to grow in this ladder. Sky is the limit for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sonal. That was a very passionate speech or sharing of experience. I'm sure one thing that the audience and I also agree, and people are bursting with questions to ask about that, but we'll hold on with that. Talent takes center stage, and there is a journey that the L&D team does. And how does that sync with the business aspirations? So that's the interesting part of this particular thing. What does business do to mitigate the skill gap? What does business do to ensure that the outcomes are met and the organization does not compromise along the way? I call upon Manish Bijlani, who leads strategic initiatives and does a lot of digitization, gamification on the learning and development space, and act as a learning enabler. So please welcome the leader of Digital Transformation FIS, Manish.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks to the RPS team for giving me the opportunity, and absolutely to the NIIT. We've heard a lot, and I'm sure everyone's waiting for a tea break. Just bear with me for another 10-15 minutes, and I'm sure you will take at least something back with you when I share my thoughts in terms of what we do at work at FIS Global. I'm Senior Director for Digital Transformation, but however, I lead the training fraternity. I lead it for, like Amitabh mentioned, for 2 different worlds, which for FIS GBPO as well, which is the BPO arm, and for the technology side as well. And I'm going to be focusing more on the technology side because that's the crux all about. The space is changing a lot. So I think we talk about realize your potential. I'll talk through some of the things, and we've been hearing, right? So I think bear with me. I think everyone's been reading around things, and we've been hearing that, it's the time, right now is the time where, you want to unleash your potential. We've been hearing that, the World Economic Forum at Davos, which has recently, been conducted, we heard that about 1 billion jobs would be radically transformed typically because of technology. That doesn't mean the jobs are going away, but they would change in the next decade. And that's where it becomes very important for all of us to think, how can we act differently in terms of our thinking, our strategies, and be very agile and give trainings which are, just apt for today's time and see what best can be done. And this is just not about training for professionals within the organization. I think it also calls for how do we change our education system. I think many of us hire people from the universities. We run training boot camps. We do that today, and I think that's where RPS helps us a lot in terms of running those boot camps for us. I'll talk through that as well. I think the point I was trying to bring in out here is there's a huge initiative, and everyone's been talking about reskilling, because I think today it's very difficult. If you look at the learnability quotient, the LQ typically, for the individuals to adopt to change is very difficult for people who've been there, seen there, trained on technology, worked on projects, done wonders for them. They find it very difficult to adopt to change. And that's where their existence becomes very difficult. We need to build a culture of adoption to change and how we can make that very comfortable. Because anyone today, and we've been talking about adaptive leadership. We've been hearing about how do we adapt to change, right? And I think that happens right from the learning as well. And learning is a secondary stage. I think before that, very importantly, what comes is your talent management, the kind of people you bring in, right? And I go back and remember, one of my bosses used to tell me about the organization saying, Manish, irrespective of how bad an employee's skills are, what matters is how good your training program is. And I used to say, I don't know. Why did she tell me that? It's not easy. Come and probably run the world like this. But I think it makes sense. Unless it's a will issue, you need to understand and adapt to everyone's style. I think Amitabh did mention, right? People think differently. We need to start thinking differently as well. It's not easy today, I think, When you talk to our children as well, they have an absolutely different mindset. And if I go back and talk to them about something like what was my childhood like, they will probably close the doors. I think we have to open the doors to understand what they have to say. And similarly, that goes at workplace as well. I think we've all been hearing about Chat GPT as well and how it's going to disrupt. It's some of the people already tried that as well. Some of the people are looking at doing that. But I think it will change the way we do the business today. And I think what's important for us is the impact of automation is going to continue. It's going to change the skill sets of the jobs. But we need to think through that the human intelligence, which we talked about, the connect, which we talked about as we start this session, how do we look at reskilling and helping people around that? So I think I'll focus around that. Very clearly, I think I want to just put 3 things which I'm going to be focusing on. How do we bring in resilience in the organization? And when we talk about bringing resilience in the organization, we talk about people. We can't do that. They're our asset. And if you look at people, how do we build that potential? And then obviously map that to the performance. We've talked about, my colleagues, Dr. Sonal talked about, how do we map our learning initiatives to the business outcomes? How do we partner with them? It cannot be any more a siloed approach. You give me numbers from a talent acquisition team or the hiring team, whatever you call it, a recruitment team, and they just hire the numbers, give us anything. It's like a garbage in and a garbage out, right? You want to be very sure of, are you preparing people for failures? Are you preparing them for the upcoming projects? And are you really sure of what you really want for them? And that's where you partner with them. We'll focus on the 3 things, which is one is people, which is obviously our tech talent today. And what can we do to develop very clear understanding of where the talent gaps are? Because when we tell someone I need these skills from the market, the recruiters are anyways facing the challenge. And I think that's where we'll focus something towards the end, where what is that I can do? Where is that I need to partner? Where is that I need to leverage or buy resources? When I say buy, as in, you're looking at a leverage pool, a contractual pool, which ensures that you can get some of those people, get your project done, and they're out. So you're not keeping the people, to the point which we were mentioning earlier, that, your people, we told them you were assets, now your current assets, the crypto. So I think we were very clear in terms of, you're here for a project, you deliver on that, you're out of it. If you do not have a strong pipeline for us to give it to them. I think talent management plays a very, very important role, because they are the first thing, very important, that when we get anyone into the organization, how strong is your talent pipeline? And I think we just think, I need to meet the numbers. But I think when we change our thought process, what I'm trying to say is, which is hire to retire kind of a thing, is very important. The talent gap, at times you don't even understand, how much the talent gap is. What are the kind of skills I'm looking at for this particular job role, right? I think it's much wider than what we think. And I think if you do some quality guys do a black belt project, they pick up, I think you would figure out that the amount of money which is lost in hiring a candidate, how do you reduce a cost of poor hire? And I think we've seen that struggling, right? We get people onboarded through certain vendor partners, we give them some amount of an amount globally across, they get there, do we really check for what has been the 60-day, 90-day kind of a thing? And they churn out, right, typically. And we lose them out. We've invested so much from hiring them, onboarding them, training them, and these trainings in technology side are anyways nothing but, if you have to prepare anyone on an entire stack with product, and a company like FIS Global, where I come from, which is a fintech company, you need to understand your product as well. You need to understand the domain, where you need to look at retail banking, you need to understand capital markets, you need to understand the payments world side of it. It's a learning curve is very high. So I think how do we partner to reduce that gap is going to play a very, very important role. I think that's where it comes into the proficiency building piece, which I've been talking about. I think the training boot camp, we have to have very focused training boot camp. We've done some fabulous job over the pandemic. I think the best thing was people were not supposed to be called in the office, sitting in that room for 8 hours, doing what they were supposed to be doing and traveling. I think that gave us a leverage. When we were partnering with our partners in the market, like RPS as well, we didn't want to say, make a train fly to Pune today, tomorrow to Bangalore, day after to Gurgaon, because these are the batches lined up. Sorry, last minute thing they cannot. We're giving flexibility. And I think hybrid workplace still continues at our place, which we feel is a very much, it works for us. It does wonders for us. I think it's very important for all of us to think as well that we should think what's worked for us best, rather than think, everyone's coming back to office. Do I really come back to office? There are roles which are going to be permanently today. We've signed contracts with the client in the BPM side as well, and probably in the technology side, where we very clearly say, your job will be delivered, your commitment to the SLAs which we have as part of our agreement, as part of the SOWs, would not change. We are able to deliver, we are able to give that gain sharing to them. It works wonders for them, it works wonders for us. Why do you want to probably abrupt this environment, which we've really worked hard to create what we've done over the last 2 years? So I think wherever it works, the contracts are like this with us. We continue to look at those contracts, working in the complete remote environment, which is work from home. And in some places, obviously, we look at hybrid environments where people coming back. I think one thing which I'm still trying to find out an answer to is, and I think I'll probably get to hear from some of you in the session, was that in the hybrid or work from home kind of environment, how do you engage with your people? How do you bring in those values? I think that's something which we already started off. So while a HR person will come on board and will say, okay, new hire induction over, day one, billing start, tomorrow, hand it over to training starts your training boot camp. But how do we inculcate and reinforce those values in terms of what is your alignment? What does value mean to you versus what does value mean to you? Do you understand what are you here for? How do you make a difference to the business? And telling them about the larger picture makes a lot of difference. So we talk about all those through our training programs as well. We've got our training leads who go in sessions, conduct some of these sessions. We've got leaders coming there as well, taking our time from the business to see themselves what kind of things are happening. We absolutely tell them, come, here's a link. You want to go, do a skip, walk in any point of time, look at it, but just please partner with us to see how much effort goes into it, right? And I think that works very well for us. Coming back to potential, obviously, which is the second very important thing, I think we're very clearly focusing on how do we reduce the skill gap. I know it's going to be there, but where do you track it? We realized when we started initially a few years back, skill gap was being tracked, okay, Team A, track it on your Excel, what are your primary skills, secondary skills, tertiary skills. What is that you want to aspire to work upon? And I think Excel's never helped. Benefits, do we need to relook at this entirely? Then we relook at it and say what needs to change. So I think it's a very dynamic world, and obviously as we move ahead, we'll get to know more about it. We lose out people today. It's very difficult to find the right talent. So how do you retain the right people, set of people? I think there should be a lot of focus around skills versus roles. I know roles play an important role. I think we spoke about adaptiveness, right? I think, and it's very important as leaders. Do we really know that we have to be adaptive leaders? Our egos have to be set aside, right? If I'm 25 years of experience, 40 years of experience, do I have an answer for everything? Can I go ahead and raise my hand and say, hey, do you have a better solution for it? Can you partner? This is best what I can think. I think that mindset needs to change absolutely, is what I would probably leave you with that thought. Last, when you look at, performance. I've been asked this question many times at least, that what do you bring on table? How do you measure effectiveness? Are you saying just a training feedback on a scale of 4 COPC standards or whatever you say, you get about 80%, that's the, you've done your job? No. I think so we've looked at changing ourselves as well. So it's a time for L&D as well to change, absolutely. And when I say that, how do you measure your initiatives? I did mention about that to the business outcomes, very important. And just not the business, I think. We've been talking about people, talent. I think very important that the employee satisfaction is also there. We were able to give them what is needed for them, because we have high expectations from them at the end of the day. The business doesn't look at it. He says, you what? 8 weeks, the moment you were hired, you were getting salary, you were getting trained, I have invested a lot into you, I need the output coming in. We see how strong today is the adoption rate. Adoption rate is just not about, when I talk to different partners today or the vendors in the market, they say adoption is more about touching it. These many people enrolled, 1,000 people enrolled, great. How many really completed it? If they completed it, how many really met what they were supposed to do? Was it simply like I had to invest 40 hours and I invested 40 hours, and what was the output of it? I think we need to absolutely look at measuring some of those things very clearly, and we do that today. And obviously, it's not a great big thing. I think you have, learning management systems. You can track it in different ways. We today track deployment and billability. I can proudly say about 75% of the people which we hired from the universities last year were successfully deployed, and we did not hire everyone in one bulk. We did it in batches from some place or the other, but when we look at it, we were in 75 to 78% range of deployability. Which means the moment I finished off my training, the project which you thought you will put this individual on, and the training you invested in would give them the benefit, they got that. And I think that's where you speak that kind of a language. People are happy to probably, work with you in partnership. Learning curve we've been talking about, that's something which again, probably in time we'll have to see how we can crack it. Because today my leaders tell me, or my colleagues tell me in the business side that, Manish, 9 to 12 weeks is a big learning curve. Can you do it as of yesterday? And I think we all understand that's not possible. You need to take a lot of things. So I think while you gauge performance, is very, very important for us to keep the learning experience in mind. Whether that's the technology side of us, whether that's the BPO side of us, learning curve is a very, very important thing. And I think that's where, I wear a hat of transformation as well. Can we look at tools, creating training environment? Can we make people understand the tools and applications? How soon can we look at doing some of those things which can help us reducing the learning curve? And we've been able to do it at some places about 15%, where trainings have been about 8 weeks, we've been able to get them down to about 5 weeks, 6 weeks as well. So, you've seen some great changes happening. But can that happen everywhere? You need to understand, you need to evaluate. Either you have a tier-wise approach, I do this, I put them into project, I get them back, but do you have that kind of a very clear commitment from the business as well, that to get them out is very difficult. And that's the reason today at least you say, hey, let him finish whatever he has to, and then let him get deployed onto it. I think it's very crucial for all of us to start measuring, and that could be anything, right? We talked about NPS today. I think Amitabh did mention about Axis Bank's probably, we have a vision to be at NPS about 80%, right? In my story, I give example of saying we all have credit cards today, right? And we all call up for something or the other. But I think the best experience today, which we get, is from Amex. Irrespective of whenever you call, whatever you ask for them, it's a flawless experience. Their NPS, their way of looking in the customer from customer lens is very different than the other organizations. I think those are some of the benchmarks, right? Why is it Starbucks coffee just only because it's money or it's a brand? No, it's the experience as well at the end of it. How does it think right from ordering to while do you get the order? How is that? I think we need to keep the customer mindset very importantly in mind as well, is what I like to say. Last but not the least, I think very important, how do you foster a culture of innovation? Because when you're doing all this, there are certain people in the organizations who will absolutely love to, engage themselves. They will like to have a competitive spirit. And we do a lot of hackathons. We've done global hackathons, we've done regional hackathons, and our leaders get absolutely surprised sitting on those leader panels when they get to hear the ideas coming from someone on the ground thinking out of the box. On the technology side, no one could even think of. And then there's a sponsorship being given around that. You form that team. Probably you have the best of the idea, but you don't have the right skills. I'm not saying it's territorial. I'll not keep those people. What do you need? What's the kind of skill set you need? I'll give you those kind of skills. So it's a cross-pollination as well. We've seen that works very well for us. And when you do all that, I think it's very, very important. How are you continuing to have the spirit of communication and collaboration? Very, very important. We've got our own in-house portals being created where you just go, typically look at what's happening on the learning side. Learning week, typically like a ticker running. Programs being launched month on month. We don't force training, by the way. We change our approach. It's all need-based. I understand from you. I only give you what you need. So it's like what you ask for. There's a difference between an a la carte menu versus a buffet, right? So we tend to leave everything, whatever, if you don't want to. But when you order something of our choice, we need to know for the fact that we'll finish it off. We've invested into that typically, right? So I think that mindset, we look at doing it. I think in learning forums, some of those channels have kept wonders for us. We look at giving them badges, rewarding them in some form or the other. Different rewards and recognitions above and beyond a lot of things which we do. And obviously, these are not just done in isolation. We do that with our people's partner, what we call it the HR. And along with that, we reward and recognize them in different forums. Last, I think I've already touched about this. But I think when I was going through and I was preparing for this, I came across this very good insight from McKinsey. There was a study typically talking about what should be a workforce adoption model. And this workforce adoption model clearly talks about the fact that you have your y-axis, which talks about typically your core business priorities. What are your non-core roles typically, and what are your hardcore roles, which are very, very clear that I need those. They are high priorities for the business. And then on your x-axis, you have the flexibility. Are you flexible or urgent? I need them right now, 3 months. And that's where you understand, you see towards your right very clearly. There are typical roles being mentioned out there. And what we're trying to say is you can't do everything in-house. So you need to be innovative, and you need to understand where do you really want to partner. And partner with, obviously, likes of what we do today, right? With RPS, or for that matter, the other people which we work on, learning platforms which we have in the market today, who assess people's capability, because every time everyone doesn't want to go through a program which is instructor-led, a blended approach. At times they want to go through something on their own, which assesses where they are. So you need to understand where you want to buy these, where you want to partner, because if you have the requirement, how can you partner? And start building these within. And when you build, your projects are not getting delayed. You're actually working in some of those to see that how you can, look at organization. There are a lot of companies today who say that we will give you, these resources tomorrow, who have the understanding of these kind of roles. So I think it's important how you look at it. I think with this said, I'll probably, wrap up the session. But if there are any questions with Francis, we'd be happy to pick it up. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Manish, we'll just set the table up for the discussion. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Manish. I know there are a lot of questions that people have. We'll just have a 15-minute or a 10-minute question answer session here. Just moderate that. And then we'll take up a couple of questions from the audience. Thank you, both of you, for that insightful thing.
Thank you.
One of the things that, the audience also would agree, and I would like to ask the first question is the skill gap myth or the urban legend that you spoke about here. And it always keeps changing. It always keeps evolving. So our organizations, you said 87% of them have a skill gap. Is it because organizations, the talent team, are chasing actually a moving target and never achieve what they want to do at any given point of time? What's your view on that?
It's definitely a moving target because, as I mentioned earlier as well, that business is agile, technology is advancing at a proliferating rate, and therefore to keep in line with what is required by the workforce strategy management group is extremely difficult, and this will continue to be a moving target because of whatever advancement is happening, and it's only about our adaptability quotient. How quickly are we going to adapt, analyze that, anticipate it, and work towards it.
Oh, okay. Your thoughts on that, Manish? Anything that you do differently in your org that mitigates this particular gap?
I think, like I said, I think it's very important because as learning partners, we can only help in bridging this gap, right? But I think a business needs to very clearly understand that how important it is for us to evaluate this. And are you really sure in terms of what are you looking at? Because at times, fair enough, ask him. This is one of the least priorities because of a lot of things happening on the business side. But I think it's very important that I could say today leaders at very senior levels in FIS Global would partner in this. They will come back very clearly with the needs. They will sign off on what they're committing to. And that's where we go about doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So at least we look at doing it twice a year at least.
Very nice. The second point that I'd like to call here is the point that Vijay touched upon, which said that skill set, tool set, and the mindset. Many a times, partners or organizations like us, we get a lot of associates coming in from organizations who say, this is not what I signed up for, or this is not the training that I want to do. And why am I getting trained every 5 months, every 6 months? Why this is not what I want. And that reduces our effectiveness of this training as well, right? So how are you working on this mindset in your organization? And it's probably a training fatigue also coming in from the workforce. How do you address that particular point?
This problem has been existing for quite some time because if you look at certain participants coming into the classroom, if the project managers or the line managers have not informed them or kept them informed that you are going for a learning for a reason and this is the skills that you are actually going to adopt, and how is this going to entail into the job role that you're doing and how efficiently you'll be able to do it. I think that communication doesn't happen very clearly. By default, it is there is some gap that occurs over there. The larger picture is not being explained to the ground level engineers. The example that I gave you about tech strategy, when something is getting rolled out in the organization, has it actually nailed down to the last level of the person in the organization is very critical. And therefore that gap of communication, not giving clear instructions, telling them that what's in it for you and why is this been planned for you, doesn't happen in a very structured manner. And that's why this problem.
Understood. We know that we heard you talk about rewards and recognitions and collaboration, etc. But is there something else that you do in order to address this particular issue from your organization or your personal experience?
I think, it's the other way around. In our time, we never asked, why do I join you? Today, employees ask you, why do I join you? What do you bring on table as well is a question being asked, right? Rather than just organizing, you've been hired for this particular role, this is your expectations. Obviously, that goes side by side, but it's very important, I think, as we all understand that the talent pipeline is something which takes anywhere about not less than 60 to 90 days for people to hire. So when people are thinking about what roles I need, it's being communicated well before. By the time people get hired, they're part of the system, someone's forgotten about it, or your project's requirements have really changed. And then there's a gap which you said, I'm sorry, I hired you for Java, you need to work on .NET. Okay. I hired you for X, you need to start working on something else, right? So I think that mindset and the communication gap, like Dr. Sonal mentioned, is very important that we keep that. The moment we're onboarding someone, I think changing or expecting that individual to change would not be the right thing. I guess we do not see too much challenge with new people getting on board because that entire communication, expectation setting, onboarding, everything, that journey is being kind of taken care of. But yes, it is the other way around when you have laterals today or people in the organization who've been there for quite some time. When you ask them to change, right, from one to the other, then they're not as agile as possible. And we struggle around that at times.
Thank you. One last point which I want to ask you, Doctor, is that the window of measurement at many times, is probably the reason that our organizations are unable to give a longer view to the associates or to their employees. I mean, there were times when a 3-year learning path is measured and it's dovetailed into the IDP of the employee, etc. But that's kind of changing. And do you agree with that, or do you want the older format, which surprisingly had done good work in a lot of organizations? What's your view on that?
The 5-year and the 3-year strategy obviously are becoming a passerby today because of the agility that we are talking about, the gaps, the skill gaps, the way the technology is advancing all across. And therefore, it is very important for us to think about in the moment, and that in the moment thing will kind of stabilize. I'm not saying that this is going to be the way it is today, but in the current phase at least, if you are able to talk about or give clarity about H1, H2 at this point in time, even for that matter, budgets. This year, I do not know how many organizations are actually talking about, budgets being planned in a very different way. There is, and they have envisaged as to what they want to spend for the whole year. However, now they're talking about, let's look at H1, let's look at H2. So that dynamics is changing. And similarly, even for the associates, or even for the learners, or for the employees, they want to know what is the work that I'm currently doing and what is the scale at which it is going to change. And that agility factor that we are talking about, that also needs to have some kind of benchmarking, some kind of borders drawn, and they need that clarity. The moment you give them clarity, you tell them what's in it for them, and you kind of guide them to that particular process. Many people are agile. At least, as he rightly said, the new folks definitely are agile. They're hungry to learn new things, and they're okay to look at what is the advantage that I would get and continue to work in alignment with us.
Understood. And your thoughts on that? Because
think,
you are more closer to the business. So.
No, I think it's also about how do you really change and how much time do you really interact. So is it like a one-time activity when you look at your business leaders? Are you part of those meetings regularly? Do you understand their pain points very clearly? What are they going through? Because at times, like we said, I think, we know exactly what is stored. The budgets probably got logged in Q4, understanding what we aim for, right? But can I spend that today is a different thing, right? Because you've been watching every step as we go. And there are shareholders, there are board of directors, everything. We all know that you're answerable to everyone. You have to be very, very cautious in terms of what you're doing, in terms of your spends. And I think that's the reason I also recommend people that just do not look for vendors. There are a lot of vendors. And I'm sure as part of Learning Fraternity, we get a lot of mails every day. Some of them we just delete it. Probably if it's a read receipt as well, the other person's put as marks important. But I think what you're looking at clearly is partners today. People who understand your objectives. People who can partner with you and understand what you need from them. They can partner with you in that goal. That makes the journey easier is what I would say works.
Wonderful. So thank you all both for giving us all these insights. I'm sure the audience has a lot of questions about this, but what we'll do is, we'll meet them after this and, probably answer their questions. So I'm here, my team is here from RPS. How we handle, businesses here is also definitely something that you would want to hear. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Doctor.